Almost every country in the world is in debt. The United States, for example, now owes more than $38 trillion, the highest level in its history. The European Union's debt is around 14 trillion, while Japan's is close to 9 trillion. Even oil-rich nations and powerful export economies carry enormous amounts of debt. But this raises an interesting question. If everyone is in debt, who exactly is owed? This is where things become more complicated than they first appear. When money, power, and history intersect, the reality is rarely simple. Debt is not just a burden. In many ways, it is the foundation of the modern economic system. Wars, financial crises, economic booms, and collapses have all been built on top of this structure. If you start tracing the chain of creditors, you eventually notice something surprising. The world is not really indebted to a single entity. In a sense, it is indebted to itself. However, this does not mean that everyone benefits equally. To understand how we reach this point, we have to go back several centuries. Long before credit cards or digital banking existed, the concept of national debt emerged largely because of war. In 1694, England was fighting France and running out of gold. The king turned to merchants for funding and offered them a deal: lend money to the state and receive regular interest payments funded by future taxes. To manage this arrangement, the Bank of England was created. This was a revolutionary development. Governments could now spend money they did not yet have. In return, lenders received something valuable: a promise from the state. These promises, known as government bonds, could also be bought and sold. This was the beginning of the modern financial system. Soon other countries adopted similar systems. France followed. The Netherlands refined it. The United States used government borrowing to finance its independence and later its expansion. Over time, national debt stopped being seen as a sign of weakness. Instead, it became a signal of credibility. The ability to borrow meant the state was trusted. In the past, empires searched for gold to become powerful. Today, governments issue bonds and collect interest. In the modern era, debt has become one of the most important realities of the global economy. The United States owes around $38 trillion, Japan more than $9 trillion, and global borrowing continues to rise. But again, the key question remains: who actually holds this debt? Take the United States as an example. About half of its debt is held by investors, but most of those investors are American institutions, such as banks, pension funds, investment funds, insurance companies, and even the central bank. Another portion is held by foreign countries. Japan is one of the largest holders, followed by China. Yet, despite popular belief, China only owns a relatively small share of the total U.S. debt. In other words, much of America's debt circulates within its own financial system. The government issues bonds. Banks and funds buy them. Sometimes the central bank purchases them and creates new money. Taxes collected from citizens are used to pay interest, which often flows back into pension and investment funds. This creates a kind of financial loop, and this pattern exists across the world. Countries lend money to each other, invest in foreign bonds, and hold each other's financial assets. In many ways, the system resembles a large table where every participant holds someone else's promise. For the system to keep functioning, confidence must remain strong. Financial markets play a major role in this. Large institutions such as pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and central banks manage trillions of dollars and influence how easily governments can borrow. If that confidence weakens, the consequences can be severe. Currencies can fall, interest rates can surge, and governments may face economic crises. In a sense, democracy decides who governs, but markets often determine who survives financially. Central banks are also crucial to this system. When they buy government bonds, they create new money in the process. This means that much of the money circulating in the economy is linked to some form of debt. Technically speaking, modern money is deeply connected to borrowing. So how does this system continue to function? The answer is trust. As long as investors believe governments will keep paying interest on their debt, the system continues to operate. But when that trust breaks, crises can emerge. For example, Greece experienced a severe debt crisis in 2010 when investors lost confidence in its ability to manage its obligations. Similar problems have occurred in countries like Argentina and Sri Lanka. Yet even after crises, the system rarely disappears. Debts are restructured, new loans are issued, and the financial cycle continues. In the modern world, government debt is rarely designed to be completely paid.